Grand Portage Resources' Herbert Gold Project in southeast Alaska highlights increased gold resource, indicated and inferred, of 860,000 ounces, in excess of 10 grams per ton gold. Expansion drilling is planned on the Herbert Gold property for the summer of 2019. Grand Portage Resources trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTCQB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thanks, Jim.
Stewart, the controversy over foreign-funded anti-resource groups. Alberta has an inquiry into see what can be learned about them. Should we ignore the mystery of what motivates the misinformation campaigns? And what prominent media voices should we pay attention to, and which ones should we ignore?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, Jim. And I think the war room idea, a lot of people have heard of this. The Alberta government, the new government under Jason Kenney, promised that they would have this action. The thing about the resource industry in Alberta, oil and gas in particular, is that it's owned by the people. You know, it's always, in every case in Canada, a public resource that is being developed, and it benefits people because of the taxes and royalties paid and the jobs and all the income tax that people who work pay and all the goods and services that are bought. It's an enormous economic stimulus. And in a province like Alberta, just like BC, it's very, very dependent on success. So when you got these organizations that aren't very transparent about their motives or methods or their money, they, raise questions. And I think the public does agree that these are legitimate questions. It's fair to wonder why. And I think the average person would also say it's fair to have an inquiry like the Allen inquiry, where they're looking into how it is that maybe $200 or $300 billion of lost opportunity over the last several years for just Alberta was brought about by groups that are not willing to be transparent. So these are legitimate questions, but at the same time, we're seeing some of the more in the Eastern press that doesn't spend a lot of time around the resource space. They tend to be myopic and very urban downtown Toronto viewpoints. So these aren't people who go beyond the cafes and the whole Renfrews of where they live very often. They're in a bubble, and so they don't get the concerns that we have in the West. And I think that's why you have these very prejudiced viewpoints that, Western Canadians aren't entitled to ask questions and aren't entitled to know things about the economy. And I think, there's a sense that as long as we're, the right tone is there and it doesn't sound defensive or personal or overly aggressive or anything, that is respectful, and conducted properly, that is very fair to ask questions about the origins of the foreign funding. I mean, just take, there's one example I think everyone's familiar with, or at least their work, the lawsuits to stop the Trans Mountain Pipeline. I mean, here's a pipeline project, $9 billion project. It's deemed to be in the national interest. Our parliamentarians have said so. 60% of Canadians, roughly, depending on the poll, support the project. So, it's very high support for a project like that. It tends to be when you ask people a question, do you support something like that? There's a tendency for them to say no, even though they know they need it. It's necessary for, the economy. So it's very high support. But here we've got an organization, West Coast Environmental Law. It's been part of, by my count, up to 25 lawsuits to fight that project, a national interest project that benefits Canadians. And as their tax forms that are readily available online from the Canada Revenue Agency show, they get 53% of their money from some unknown foreign organizations. Why? Who are those organizations? What's their motivation? Jim, you tell me what you think. Is it unfair to ask what the motivation is and who is providing that money?
Well, you don't know if it's a foreign government, if it's Saudi Arabia trying to upset the Alberta oil trade. You don't know.
Yeah, they want to keep it a secret. I mean, I don't think there's likely anything, truly nefarious, but but just the mere fact that they're not willing to be honest about it raises questions, reasonable ones.
Well, also, too, we know that foreign governments are trying to influence things here. They tried to influence the municipal elections in Vancouver. They have people connected to the Chinese government who are part of the Liberal campaign in Richmond. They don't stop, and what's more, embarrassment doesn't work in their case.
Well, this week we've learned that the highest security official in our federal police agency is accused of the gravest kind of crimes involving Chinese espionage. We know that in 2016 in the U.S. election, the presence of Russian antics was a not insignificant factor, and we know that every day there's someone trying to hack into all our systems. I mean, it's a fact of life for security administrators in any organization that you're out there protecting the integrity of your IT systems. As a matter of course, it's not, one day there might be an attack. No, there's attacks on you all the time. And this naive belief that none of that exists around important economic questions where we, Canada, are seeking to be a truly global player. You know, we've been, because of this foreign activism, in large part, all these lawsuits that have slowed down approvals, Canada has been kept out of the global energy market. And you think, okay, there's the drone attacks last weekend in Saudi Arabia. It took out over 5 million barrels a day of oil production. That's more than Canada produces, just gone. Now, of course, it's going to come back. We know that. But it's had quite an effect. Now, if the Trans Mountain Pipeline project had been finished and not been opposed by foreign-funded organizations with unknown motives, we would already be able to be a swing supplier in situations like that. We would be able to ensure that the refineries in China and Singapore are able to source the oil that we can supply. They're going to get that oil from somewhere, you know, Venezuela or other Middle Eastern countries, as well as Saudi Arabia, or they can get it from Canada, where we have these high standards of social, environmental quality in what we do, and instead we've got these non-transparent foreign organizations that are using our court system to thwart the national interest. How about that?
Stuart, do you find it hard to understand why Quebec is so against Alberta oil but welcomes Arab oil tankers into the heart of Montreal?
Yeah, I mean they have a contradictory set of views on these issues. It's a really interesting question. Why is Quebec so distinct? Because if you ask Quebecers, they'll say, yeah, it's a good idea to use more Canadian oil. They would go for that. Of course, I think are well known that Quebecers, just like any other Canadians, we all like to flock down to warm places in the winter. Quebecers know less than anyone else, and there's no way to do that in a canoe. I mean, you can't get Greta Thunberg's boat and sail down there. You've got to fly down or drive down, and that's what people do. So that means fossil fuels. And there's a disconnect. If you say to Quebecer, well, what about, you've got this energy-rich lifestyle, how about a pipeline to allow Canadian oil to be used here? They might like the idea of Canadian oil, but they don't like the idea of a pipeline to move that Canadian oil. So that's where you get these weird contradictions. And I think Quebec is the one province in the country where you get the most extremes in this disconnect.
Is Alberta correct in investigating this stuff? Because we've had Amnesty International say, oh, that means journalists are going to be thrown in jail or threatened. Do you feel that they're exaggerating the case?
Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous. We have all the legal protections. The idea that questions can be asked about a topic so it can be understood, that's what should happen in a free, open society. I think one of the Eastern papers editorialized against Alberta's right to know what's going on. And one of the points they made, which I thought was, downright bizarre, was that the inquiry is based on the idea that there is some sort of conspiracy of industry in the U.S. that is behind the environmental investments. Now, It's possible that's true, but I think what we know is that the story of the environmentalists' money has more to do with these foundations that are pursuing environmental goals. They may do it in a misguided way, in a way that prejudices against Canadians, but still they are doing it for what they call environmental reasons. But the misportrayal of that, I mean, if you go to the terms of reference of the Allen Inquiry, there's none of that in it. It's very straightforward stuff. It's just cut and dried. Let's get some answers on questions that we don't understand because of the lack of transparency. It's that simple. So why we should be afraid of that when we're demanding transparency? Hey, if a company wants to build a project, and maybe it's a mine, maybe it's a pipeline or drilling activity, they have to go through processes with the regulators. They have to disclose everything. And the ownership of the companies, the who's who, the risk management approach, all of that has to be scrutinized and approved. And so that's the standard faced by industry when it wants to do things. But there's no standard when a foreign-funded organization comes in, defames and trashes our processes. We had the whole National Energy Board, an institution in Canada that was doing an excellent job of regulating the energy systems, respected around the world. Its procedures and approach emulated in countries that wanted to do energy right. They'd come to Canada, study our NEB, and take away that knowledge and improve their systems. Well, this institution was completely trashed and defamed by foreign-funded lobbyists who saw it as a way to delegitimize our approval process. They just joyfully used modern propaganda techniques with their sort of fake media outlets that they've also created and funded with foreign money to create, I think, fears amongst Canadians that the approval process was somehow lacking or wrong, and that led to the dismantling of that entire agency. And they've gone and created a new one. Now the same thing is going to happen all over again. Let's not be naive. We really need to rally around our important institutions, especially our energy regulators, when we get into these problems, and not accept these bogus arguments from the foreign organizations that somehow Canadians don't know how to run their business or country. I mean, it's insulting.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, there's a lot of issues surrounding northern caribou. You say Alberta did it right, BC's botched it. Can you explain?
Oh yeah, well this is an issue that's been around a while. I'm just a quick update because I think it's going to be showing up again in a different form in the Reconciliation Act. The province of BC, they've made a unilateral decision without any consultation that we need to have UNDRIP, the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, which was really a governance structure created for countries unlike Canada that lack our systems of governance and laws that could sort of emulate the good approach. Instead, what's happened is some of the technocrats and politicians in Victoria have said, no, we need that for BC too. So they've adopted it. The Reconciliation Act is going to be introduced this fall. I think today the BC Assembly of First Nations is getting the briefing from the government on it. There's been no consultation with industry. There's a real naivety in the part of the BC government that we aren't being watched, observed by the capital markets investors. They will see what's going on here and they will say, what is that? There's been no explanation. There's been no attempt to talk to industry at all. They're going to go out in the next couple of weeks, and we'll hear the minister talking to the Chamber of Commerce and saying what a great plan it is. But there's been no consultation. So I think it's a travesty, especially for First Nations who are seeking to be involved in the economy. So the prelude to that, the Northern Caribou thing. I mean, we saw the same approach employed in northern BC. Again, there was no consultation with local communities or industry. The federal government realized that they could easily play a strong hand with the BC government, one that they didn't try with Alberta. They've taken a very different approach with Alberta on the same issues with protecting the caribou species, the herds that are really at threat. I mean, there are real issues here, Jim. Let's not forget that. Real issues on the protection of important species. But the difference is that when you have a government that stands up to Ottawa and says, no, you're not going to bully us and make us do these things, we're going to negotiate with you for the best interests of our province, then you can actually see a difference in outcome, and that's what's happened. So BC's rolled over on these issues and didn't get a fair deal, and that's created an enormous amount of upset. If you go to the interior, northern BC right now, people are we don't hear about it much in the lower mainland, so you might think, what's this issue he's talking about? But believe me, if you do talk to people in the north, as I do, you'll realize that there's a lot of apprehension over the potential loss of jobs, economic opportunity, the support for communities all around the north where these policies are in effect. So that's my a little capsule on that issue. I think it's a little bit technical. I don't want to get into the whole thing. We probably don't have time, but I think it's worth tracking and keeping up with on your show from time to time.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, I'm curious, what is a Vancouver Max? It's not a kind of condo, is it?
No, not a condo. It sounds like it could be, maybe a new kind of coffee. We had Venti and Grande and whatever. Maybe it's the Max, the biggest coffee. No, it's not. It's not a new product at Starbucks Vancouver only. It's something else. We first saw the term Vancouver Max back in, I think, June when the federal government reapproved the Trans Mountain Pipeline. They had a few new rules and regulations and standards they wanted to apply at the time. And one of them was this Vancouver Max, a shipping standard that, as part of making sure this Trans Mountain oil pipeline project expansion was the best it could be, they said, we have special considerations for the orcas, for the killer whales in the Strait of Georgia, and we would like to see there be a ship type, an oil tanker that has got a design that is to minimize the impact of shipping on that population of whales. And there's about 75 of them out there. It's actually a fairly stable population, but they do have troubles over food supplies. We saw this past year. So it's a real issue, and we see industry now stepping up to it. And I want to tell you a little about what I've heard about what's cooking in regards to developing this made in Vancouver solution. So they've got this TK Shipping, actually, which is a Vancouver-based international shipping company. It's, I think, the third largest LNG shipping carrier company in the world. They have oil tankers. In fact, one of their oil tankers was just in Vancouver, filling up with a load of crude oil in Burnaby to take to a foreign market. And they had an earlier one that went to China, the Eric Spirit. So they've actually, unlike in the past, they've started to have their ships involved in local transport of goods, which is kind of cool. Anyways, TK Shipping, innovative, forward-looking company. They have taken on the task of designing a Vancouver Max, and I look forward to learning more about this and relating it to you. But what I know now is that they think they can reduce 90% of the noise coming from the ship. And it's one of those breakthrough ideas they've come up with. So a lot of the noise from ships that we think is a concern to killer whales comes from the shaft and the engine transmitting the power through the shafts to the propeller, which of course turns and propels the ship. But the noise doesn't come from the propeller so much as what's inside the hull. So making it quieter, making sure that the dampening structure for the engine is better. But here's the other cool thing, is that they're talking about when the ship comes close to the killer whale ground. So as it comes in, say, if it's coming in from the Pacific, gets around Victoria, at that point, what the Vancouver Max will do is it will switch the power to a generator from the engine. So they will have some kind of stored or power generation capacity that is not from the main engines that make all that noise. And the generator will drive the propeller through that entrance to the Strait of Georgia, through the Gulf Islands, where the killer whales do like to hang out when they're here. And in that way, we'll have that noise reduction. So it's terrific. I mean, it's probably a long-term thing to actually have that first ship that uses this technology in. But I've spoken with the company, and it sounds like they are making really good progress on it.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. You can find him on Twitter at SJ Muir, and also his website is resourceworks.com. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.